right, the great Eddie Hall ahead of your big fight with Mariusz Pudzianowski. I suppose first off, how is training going? How is getting the weight down going? How is all of that that part of getting ready for this fight?
Training's going well. Um, Getting the weight down is always going to be tough. I'm 160 kilos, and I'm a man that likes his steak and black pudding and bacon and everything. So getting the weight down is pretty tough. But training's going really good. I had my hand forced about upping the rounds from 2 minutes to 4 minute rounds. So I've had to sort of up my cardio to fight for 4 minute rounds, and I've adjusted quite well. I'm quite happy with the progress on that. But otherwise, yeah, just daily punching people in the face and getting punched in the face is my daily routine.
I thought it was interesting that when you were talking about like making that adjustment and how like you're going to be fighting in essentially bursts, right? Like it's going to be like maybe they're 4 minute rounds, but it will not be you running at Marius for 4 minutes. That's not something that necessarily is going to be how it works. But you've got explosive bursts, and obviously for your size, you're like quite a bit more athletic than most guys who are your weight. I'm probably not too far off your weight, and not even close to as athletic. So it can be tough to get that balance right. But yeah, the plan is basically burst in with big bursts of explosivity, and as opposed to prolonged sort of pressure over 4 minutes, which would be tough to do in your debut.
No, no, exactly that. I think I think that goes for both of us. If we were to put pressure onto each other constantly for 4 minutes, I think you'd gas out pretty quick. So exactly that. You've got to put pressure on. You've got to sort of step back, be aware of what's coming. So I think it's going to be a lot of to me to you scenario. He throws 5 shots, I throw 5 shots. It's going to be tit for tat. That's basically how these big guys work. Especially the heavyweights.
How much were you able to learn from the whole Navati brothers thing? Like, obviously, I mean, 90% of that fight was you standing with your back to the cage and trying to not get your back taken, basically. But obviously, towards the end, you were able to show a bit of something. But what did you learn from that experience and being at least in the cage and being around it?
I mean, learning wise, I mean, every time you go in those scenarios, you're always learning. You're learning how to cope with the adrenaline. You're learning how to
Yeah.
cope with the crowds. You're learning how to cope with the build ups. So, and that's great experience. Just building up to those events and doing the prep and everything else is invaluable. But in terms of, is that going to any of that going to transfer what I did in the ring to Marius? No, it's not. It's a completely different scenario.
Yeah.
2v1.
Well, I wonder, like, I mean, physically, do you remember how you were feeling like after the first knockout, mainly the one where you like that was quite a bit of activity where the guys run in, you do the power bomb, you land a couple of shots. Like it wasn't a long period, but that's one of those like you're talking about explosive
Yeah.
periods. How were you feeling like in that couple of minutes when they were scraping your man off the ground and getting him out of there? Were you like kind of feeling like, oh geez, I'm shattered after this, or were you kind
No,
of
no, no.
thinking
Geez, I
like,
mean, I think they were. Geez, what were they? Were they 2 minute rounds? 2 minute rounds?
yeah,
And I think that action. It was the third round, so it was the
yeah, it's
last
probably about
round.
5 seconds or so.
It was the last round. We had 30 seconds to go. And the referee came to us both in the after the second round and said, "Look, we need some fucking action." And then that last 30 seconds, they just decided to tackle me, and that was perfect. They just came at me and just gripped him and just threw him around. But as I say, it's those you can train for years and years and years for these like 5 seconds of destruction, and that's exactly what it was.
Were you a little nervous as the seconds were ticking down? Like, there's a chance maybe they're gonna play this out, and I might lose on the scorecards here.
Well, yeah,
The ones who
100%.
had thrown one or two punches.
Yeah, it got to the third round, and they were up on points because they were landing leg kicks and then kept running away. So if it had gone to the scorecards, 100% they'd have beat me on points. So I was, getting pretty frustrated, and obviously you don't want to. They were small guys, 265-kilo guys, and you'd never live it down, would you? So I think it was super important that action happened right at the end. I mean, it saved everything.
Yeah, of course. Well, it definitely saved the show because I mean, people remember the crazy moment. They don't remember that, like for whatever it was, 4.5 minutes, 5 minutes beforehand, it was looking like a complete flop, right? Like it was looking like
Yeah,
these
yeah,
guys
yeah,
were endeavoring, like it was their show, and they were endeavoring to make it a boring show that people would be
yeah,
upset about.
yeah.
Have you talked to
No,
them since? What are those guys up to these days?
Oh, sorry, they actually fought again this weekend just gone. They did another 2v1 in Poland. Must have been against some Polish fighter, some big Polish
Right.
fighter, and they actually won. So they
Oh,
actually
fair
beat the
play.
guy. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And if you go and watch it, the tactics were pretty good. They sort of attacked from the same side, and one
Mhm.
grip the top, one go the bottom. Yeah, and they managed to overpower this guy and give him a good scene too. It was pretty cool to watch.
Fair play to them. Well, look, when it comes to Pudzianowski, obviously there's a whole lot more of him to watch. I mean, he's been around the block forever. I mean, like when you were even getting into strongman, he was probably already done at that. He was probably doing MMA like way before you were even getting into strongman, right?
So I would say I think he retired 2009 from strongman,
Yeah.
and I think I only started strongman when I was like, geez, I'm going to say like 2007.
Right.
So I was only doing strongman a couple of years in the amateurs. By the time I got to World Strongest Man 2012, he was long gone and he was doing his MMA. So yeah, he'd had like 4 or 5 years experience before he'd even sort of got to World Strongest Man.
And I mean, I'm imagining as someone who's interested in fighting, right? You were probably watching him the whole time and kind of amazed me. First off, by the transformation, like he's, I mean, like the fact that he's able to make that heavyweight limit is pretty. Like, I mean, what other multiple time world strongest man winner could do that? He's probably the only one.
Well, I think if you go back on his first fights, I think he fought at like 140 plus kilo,
Yeah.
and I honestly think that was when he was his most dangerous.
Right.
You watch those fights, and he went in and he just bullied him. He just leg kick, leg kick, leg kick, picking him up, slamming him. I think that was his most dangerous sort of point in his career. And then he got his weight down, went into the rankings, and he fought for I'm pretty sure he fought for the KSW title at some
Yep.
point, which puts him at the top two in Europe, you know?
Yeah.
So it's a legit fucking badass. Like, Mariusz Pudzianowski is a hard motherfucker. Not to be talked down at all.
No, certainly not. Certainly, for your first proper fight, first serious fight, I mean, it's a much different challenge than what you were going to do before, which was it was another strongman you were going to fight, right?
So
In
we
Qatar.
signed a deal to fight. I was going to fight Martin Ford,
Yes.
Mitchell Hooper, and Brian Shaw in Qatar, and it all fell through the last minute, which is why this fight came about. Really, is I did all that training, about 6, 7 months training. It all fell through, and I was like, "Fuck's sake, this is a shambles." I need to do something with this training, and that's when we put the feelers out and got some attention with the Marius fight, and took us a year to sort of negotiate it and get it to this point.
And what's interesting as well is you seem to subscribe to the idea that like maintaining the weight and having that power and that explosivity that comes with that is better than the alternative of like cutting a whole load. Like when you fought Thor, right? Like he cut a massive, massive amount of weight and he looked like a different
Mm.
guy when he was in the ring. But then when it came to who was hitting the hardest and who was feeling the brunt of the punches, he was definitely feeling them more than you were feeling them off of him
Mm.
whenever a big one would land.
Yeah, no, I'm a big believer. I mean, that fight was a complete fuck up for me. I tore my left bicep going into that
Yeah.
fight, so I literally had to go in and fight that guy with one arm. But had that not have happened, I'm 100% certain that power would have been just too much, because I think I was 8 kilos lighter than him, you know.
Yeah.
But like with the height difference, it was like 6 inch, six, seven
Yeah.
inches height
Yeah.
difference. So yeah, I was still
The first punch you
squatting.
threw stuck him down, didn't it?
Say that
The
again.
first punch you landed properly put him on the
Oh
ground,
wow,
didn't it?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, it was. I was strong, and I'm a big believer that taken into MMA is probably more dangerous.
Yeah.
I think Marius proved that point when he went into MMA when he first, 140 kilo. His size and strength just it was people are so shit scared of him. So yeah, I'm a big believer in being strong. I've never heard a fighter say, "I wish I was weaker for that fight." I've never heard that. As long as
Yeah.
you're fit enough, I think be as strong as you possibly can be.
Is the whole thing with Thor over? Is that chapter of your life finished at this stage? And I mean, when he couldn't prove in front of the crowd that he could lift the weight and everything, and then the boxing match is done and everything. Is that whole chapter finished?
I think it's done. Yeah, we had his discrepancies. He had his sore loser moment where he couldn't take a loss, and we had a fight about it. Unfortunately, the wrong man won in that circumstance. But yeah, I got to punch a man in the face, which for me was just a delight. Um, so yeah, let him carry it. He's gone back to strongman because he's got nothing else going for him. So let him crack on. I don't think he'll ever come back to do the rematch. So let him crack on. I'm done with that fucking dickhead.
But you wouldn't mind, like, if he were to decide, you know what, actually, I quite like if he watches the Pudzianowski fight and decides, you know what, I fancy it. You wouldn't mind maybe having a go in the cage with him?
I think doing business with a man or doing sport with a man that you hate that much is
Yeah,
a
yeah,
bad
sure.
idea. And I don't know. I just feel like you got such bad omens with that Thor fight. We didn't get paid from that Thor fight. It was meant to be $1 million each, and it all just fell through. And I think a lot of that was, people just being fannies and wanting guaranteed money instead of relying on pay-per-views. And I think Thor was a big a big brunt of that problem. I think the deals fell through because of his decisions in the prep
Yeah.
up to that fight. So I think just doing business with that man, I just don't want to do it.
And it was an
But yeah,
ugly
look, if
fight
the
week as
rematch
well,
is
right? I
there,
remember like the
I'd
whole
probably
week, the
take it.
build up, the press conference, everything was ugly in the
It was,
lead up
yeah,
to that one.
exactly. It was just too much hatred there, and there still is. So it's just not a good idea to do business with someone you hate that much. And that's what fighting is. You go in to do business.
Yeah, of course. And you don't hate Marius nearly as much as
No, I don't hate
it seems
Marius at
like you actually
all.
quite like him. It seems like you almost admire him in a way.
I do. Marius is one of the main reasons I got into strongman. He was a massive inspiration, and he's that icon, isn't he? He's that iconic symbol of when you think of strongman, people think of Mariusz Pudzianowski. That guy with the abs and the big shoulders, and he looked good. So yeah, I've got nothing but admiration and respect for Marius, but I'm still going to punch him in the face as hard as I can.
What did Tom Aspinall and his team say to you about this fight, and what has their advice been?
Um, it's it. I think most people I speak to, it's always like, oh, he's an hard bastard, and I quite agree. He is a
Yeah.
hard bastard. I'm probably chewing off more than I should, but I always do. And it's the man that take risks that gets massive rewards. Um, but they all say he's beatable. I think if you just stick to your plan, he is a beatable man. And we've all had good discussions. We've done lots of sparring, lots of drills, and yeah, he's a man at the end of the day. And you get punched on that chin, you go lights out like everybody else.
You mentioned that like he's kind of like he's like these levels above, like where he'll just ragdoll even yourself, like no matter what the size, because Tom is just this crazy guy. Like, do you think he'll do that to John Jones when they do fight? Do you think he'll show those levels and finally be the man to beat John Jones?
I mean, look, man, I'm not John Jones, but I can honestly, hand on heart, say I've never had such a humbling experience as to getting in the ring with Tom Aspinall and sparring and doing the grappling because you just feel like a little girl. Even a man my size, he
Yeah.
just uses your strengths against you, and his hands are so fast. I mean, his footwork is just incredible. You just feel like a fucking fanny going in the ring and doing business with Tom Aspinall. And that's me. That's like a world's strongest man saying that. So yeah, it's a very humbling experience going in the ring with Tom.
Will he beat John Jones?
I believe so. Yeah, I believe so. John Jones is obviously the champ. And he's formidable. But there's a reason. There's a reason this fight has been ducked, in my opinion. If John Jones thought he could beat him, he'd fucking fight him right now, wouldn't he?
Well, he certainly would make enough money. I know that much, and I know that this fight with Pudzianowski is interesting. One kind of generic question that I have to ask, because I feel like every interview you do, you're going to be asked about the diet. What is the
Yeah.
diet plan going into a fight like this? And when it comes to, like you say, having to cut down a bit more weight than you're maybe used to.
So I've actually been on the carnivore diet for this fight prep. So I just eat nothing but meat, eggs, and dairy, and
Right.
it's been a pretty good diet.
How do you
It's
feel?
helped me. It's helped me to maintain all my muscle mass. I've dropped body fat, and my energy levels are through the roof. My endurance is insane. So that's pretty much been the diet. I have not restricted what I've eaten at all. I have just eaten meat, eggs, and dairy, and as much of it as I want. and the body fat's come off. You know, I think when I started the prep, I was 170 kilo, and I'm down to, I think at the minute, 158. I might lose a couple more kilo going into the fight, just to be a little bit more strict. So I might fight at 155, 156, something like that.
That's impressive. That's great. And you're still feeling good, even having lost that. That's like what, about 30, 40 pounds almost?
Yeah, thereabouts. Yeah, no, I feel good. The main thing is the training we do. It doesn't matter what weight I am. We always gauge it on how fit I am. You
Mm.
know, am I doing those 4 minute rounds and then able to recover within 90 seconds and go again? And at the minute, I can say yes. So I've got no intention to lose any weight because the cardio is there.
Have you thought about who you'll call out afterwards? I guess Logan and Jake Paul are a couple of the guys that might be on the list.
Look, man, I mean, the media is great at twisting shit, aren't they? I think I was asked the question, would you fight them? And I'm like, if the money's right, I probably would. And then that gets turned into I've called them out. Um, but yeah, you know, look, if the money is right, I would fight the pair of them. And I think that, you know, when you're having these fights, when they're having those fights with the 16-ounce gloves, you come into a world where you put 4-ounce gloves on. You don't know you've been hit till you've been hit with a 4-ounce
Yeah.
glove. You might as well be bare knuckle. You know, when you get one in the face, it fucking hurts. So, you know, that knockout capability really does ramp up when you get those 4-ounce gloves on. So, yeah, I fancy my chances. I think I've got them both in the ring. Catch one of them on the chin, they're going lights out, and then one-on-one, it's easy.
Not to mention, I don't fancy a leg kick off you either. I don't. That doesn't seem too appealing at all.
No, you're completely right. It's been a good weapon in my arsenal. You know, those leg kicks. I don't have to put much effort in. You know, I'm knocking people off their feet. I'm giving people dead legs. So yeah, it's been very eye opening using your legs and fighting, and it helps you draw them in. You know, you can kick them and almost pull them in with your legs. So it's been fun learning that aspect.
Last one. What is the official prediction? Do we think it's going to go all 8 minutes, or do we think Marius is getting put out?
Fuck, man. I hate doing predictions because you always look such a dick if you say you're going to win and you don't. Um, But I just think there's going to be fireworks. I think it's going to be a knockout. Um, I just know I've got the capabilities to knock him out, and I've got the capabilities to go the full 8 minutes. So that's all I'll say.
For sure. Look, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. And hopefully our next interview is after a big win on April 26th.
Awesome, man. Thank you for your time.
Thanks very much.